Story 1. The Night Watchman. You ever notice how rain changes the way a place feels? It softens the edges, quiets the noise, and somehow makes shadows heavier. Tonight's story begins on such a night when Rangpur Railway go-down was soaked in steady rhythmic rain, and the man guarding it discovered he wasn't alone. Scene 1. The posting. Habibur Rahman had worked as a night guard for almost 12 years, never complained, never caused trouble, never feared the dark. The go-down was old but harmless, used for storing old railway tools and unused cargo crates. Quiet shifts, predictable nights. Until the storms began. That particular night, the rain was relentless, the type that blurs distance and swallows sound. Habib wrapped his shawl tighter and settled beside the kerosene lamp. Around 1:40 a.m., he heard it. A metallic dragging noise, slow, purposeful, like someone pulling a heavy iron rod across the old warehouse floor. Habib froze. No worker comes at night, no deliveries, no reason for anyone to be inside. He called out, thinking maybe a dog got trapped. But the dragging didn't stop. Scene 2. Inside the go-down. Habib unlocked the rested door and stepped inside. The smell hit first. Wet wood, iron, and something faintly sour. He swept the beam of his torch across the room. Nothing. Yet the dragging sound continued, now coming from the far back, behind a stack of crates that hadn't been moved in years. He walked slowly. Each step echoed louder than the last because of the rain muffling everything outside. Then the noise stopped. A whisper followed. Not a voice, not quite wind either. Something in between. Habib felt a chill crawl up his spine. He turned the torch towards the crate stack. One of the crates had shifted by almost a foot. Impossible for him to ignore now. Scene 3. The file. The next day, shaken but unwilling to sound foolish, he quietly asked an old station master about the go-down. The man paused, then sighed. Some years back, a junior engineer disappeared, last seen going inside that same go-down during a stormy night. They assumed he slipped into the river or ran away. Search stopped within a week. Habib felt his skin tighten. His locker box was never emptied, the station master added. You want to see it? Inside the locker was a small, water-stained notebook. The final page read, "If anyone finds this, please don't stay in the go-down alone during storms. Something moves the crates. Something waits behind them. It mimics sounds. It wants me to follow the noise." The writing ended abruptly with a long scratch mark. Scene 4. The second night. That evening, rain returned harder than before. Habib didn't want to go, but duty doesn't care about fear. He pushed the door open and froze. All the crates were now arranged in a straight line down the middle of the room, perfectly aligned like someone or something was clearing a path. A path that led to the darkest corner of the go-down. Habib whispered a prayer and stepped backward. Then he saw it. Not a figure, not a face. A shadow that didn't match anything in the room. It moved even though nothing else did. It stretched itself along the cleared path, towards him. Habib turned and bolted outside, slamming the door behind him. The dragging noise resumed instantly, this time faster. Aftermath. Habib resigned the next morning. When a new guard took over, he laughed off the story as superstition. He lasted 3 nights. Every guard since then refuses storm duty alone. Railway authorities officially claim the go-down is structurally unsafe, but the old workers say something else. During heavy rain, When the pounding gets loud, you can hear the crates move on their own. And if you listen closely, you'll hear someone whisper from the dark corner, "Come closer. I need help."
The house on Kana Road. Intro. Here's the thing. Some houses aren't haunted by ghosts. They're haunted by habits, by the echo of choices that keep replaying themselves until the walls remember how to speak. This one sits on Kana Road, where the rain always arrives like a patient visitor, soaking the earth and giving the old house time to remember. Scene 1. Arrival. Sadia moved back to her hometown to look after her mother. She had left for university years ago and carried a tidy life in the city. Account spreadsheets, late trains, small coffees at odd hours. Returning felt practical, temporary. She told herself she'd stay until her mother recovered, then go back. The house on Kana Road belonged to Sadia's late uncle. It had been empty for a decade, downsized by neighbors and claimed by Ivy. People in the neighborhood whispered about the place without malice, the same way you whisper about peeling paint or a stubborn roof leak. Old man Hussein kept to himself, they said. Quiet, never married, odd hours. She bought it cheap. Repairs were extensive, but manageable. She liked the long veranda, the high windows that caught the rain, and the way the banyan tree leaned like it wanted to listen. On her first night, rain came down in even sheets. She set a kettle, opened a book, and listened to the house settle. Old wood makes noises like memory. That's what she told herself. Scene 2. The clock. There was a clock in the hallway, tall, wooden, with a face the color of tea. It stopped on the same minute every time, 2:06. It had stopped like that the day the uncle died, Sadia learned from a cousin. Nobody had bothered to fix it. People left it that way as if the exact minute had meaning, though no one could say what. Sadia wound the clock because it bothered her. Once it began to tick again, the house felt less like a museum. Nights were quieter with the small, steady rhythm of time keeping its place. About 10 days later, a neighbor called at dawn. Sadia, you awake? There's someone at your gate. Better check. When she opened the door, there was no one. Only the muddy footprint of boots and a wet scrap of newspaper, folded so precisely it looked like a note. She unfolded it at the kitchen table. The paper was an old commerce supplement, the ink blurred by rain. There were 3 words scribbled across the margin and a hand she did not recognize. Don't wind it. Her feeling was sharp and immediate. Irritation, then unease. People drop odd notes. This town had its inventory of small cruelties and small kindnesses. She threw the paper into the sink, but kept the line in the back of her throat. That night, the clock worked fine, until at 2:06, the ticking stopped. Not a usual pause. A clean silence fell that pressed against her ears like a held breath. Scene 3. The record. Sadia found an old gramophone in a back room. Its brass horn was dented, but the needle moved when she set it on a record. The record was a scratchy collection of songs her uncle must have enjoyed. Slow, familial, full of words about rain and leaving. The song played once and slackened, as though remembering something mid-verse. On the third night, where the house felt like a throat caught between words, the gramophone started on its own. She woke to the soft crackle of the record, to a voice singing in a language she knew but hadn't heard in years. The song turned and turned, then stopped exactly at that same unstable point, where a long silence followed. After that, small things began to alter. A chair turned slightly at the dining table, though she knew she had left it upright. A bowl of lentils was disturbed as if someone had tested it for warmth. The jasmine plant by the window seemed to thin, as if something kept brushing past. Sadia told herself she was tired. Caregiving bends you into a patience you wear like a second skin. But the more she explained it away, the more the house seemed intent on disagreeing. Scene 4. The neighbor's memory. Mrs. Karim, who ran the tea stall 3 houses down, had been in the neighborhood for 50 years. She liked Sadia and called her Beta with an unembarrassed affection. One afternoon, after giving Sadia a thermos of tea, she leaned in and spoke quietly. "Your uncle didn't like the clock wound," she said. "People used to come by at night. Men who'd whisper and leave. Not thieves. No, not that. They would come and sit in the dark and listen. Your uncle would offer them tea. He'd wind the clock sometimes to make them leave early. They liked the 2:06 pause." Sadia asked why they left. Mrs. Karim shrugged. They were after time itself, maybe, or the chance to hear the house say something it shouldn't. Sadia laughed at the phrasing, but felt the laugh peel thin and brittle. The idea that someone would come to listen at night made her stomach tighten. She had been treating the house like a place to fix. She had not considered it a place that kept visitors. Scene 5. The voice. It began as a whisper, not audible from the courtyard or the road, but an internal whisper. She woke one night certain someone was calling her name. It was soft, a breath-shaped sound that could have been sleep itself. She told herself to be brave. She followed the sound because curiosity is a poor substitute for confidence. The voice led her to the hallway where the clock stood. 2:06. The face glared like a small pale moon. "Sadia," the voice said, clear and close, so close she imagined breath on her neck. She spun. There was no one. She reached to wind the clock, irrationally defiant. As her hand touched the wood, the voice shifted from a whisper into a layered chorus, soft at first, then pressing, as if multiple breaths were speaking together from different corners of the house. "Leave it," they said. "Do not wind the minute." Her fingers tightened on the key. It trembled. For a moment she thought of the note at the gate. The 3 words returned like a warning, and she heard herself obey. The next storm arrived violent and unannounced. Wind scraping at the banyan, rain throwing itself at the windows with the force of a hand. The house folded into shadows. Sadia sat by the window, the tea gone cold beside her, and watched the water mop the world into streaks. The clock stood silent at 2:06. At 2:06 on the dot, something in the house shifted. The gramophone started again. Not music now, but a recording of voices. Soft, conversational, overlapping. They spoke about days that had nothing to do with Sadia. Arguments about money, about what to do with the house, about some old debt paid in a way that left a residue, like silt left behind after a river changes course. The voices grew in confidence until they formed a sentence directed at her. "We stayed because you would listen," they said. "We left when you stopped. Come back." The sound was not entirely human. It layered into metallic echoes, as if the house itself had learned to imitate voice by rubbing against the right seams. Sadia felt something in her chest unhinge. She stood and walked the corridor, following the sound. It led to the back room, to a small trunk she had not opened. Inside were envelopes, yellowing receipts, photographs of men she did not know smiling with her uncle. A ledger recorded names, dates, and small sums. In the margins, tiny notations read, 2:06 agreed, and leave the clock. She read until the record stopped. The ledger suggested her uncle had been giving something to people who came at night. Not money exactly, but something that required a pause in time. The entries were precise. appointments kept with a rituality that felt modern and old at once. Why 2:06? The ledger offered no explanation beyond the notation, as if the minute itself was a contract. She realized the house had been a place where people came with grievances and left them in the dark. Her uncle, alone and careful, had permitted the pause that let them speak and then depart. The clock wind set the length of witness. Now those voices called for it back. She could wind the clock. She could let the minute breathe and perhaps open a channel to whatever people placed in that pause. Or she could keep the house silenced and risk that the visitors would grow louder, impatient. She thought of duty and of her mother upstairs, sleeping that same rain-soaked night. She imagined the house filling with more voices, with demands and old debts that had nothing to do with her. She imagined the ledger's names forming a line that led straight to the threshold. In the end, she went into the yard, stood under the rain, and let it wash at her face until the decision felt like a choice and not a panic.